There's something about the way a single moment can rip apart everything you thought you understood. One decision, one picture, one line of text, and suddenly, the life you knew seems like it was just an illusion. I never thought I'd find myself in this situation, but now, as I sit here, I have no choice but to face the truth. It all started one evening. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that screamed, "This is the moment that will define everything." I was sitting on the couch in our living room, trying to unwind after a long day of work. She was sitting across from me, eyes glued to her phone, barely looking up. I didn't think anything of it. It had been like this for weeks now. Elise, my wife, always on her phone. Not that it mattered at the time. I had my own things going on, too. But then the phone buzzed. Elise didn't even flinch. She just picked it up, unlocked it, and scrolled through whatever was on the screen. I didn't know why, but something about the way she reacted triggered something inside me. It was the casualness of it. That's when I felt it, the shift. I wasn't suspicious, not exactly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I tried to ignore it. I really did. I continued watching TV, pretending like everything was normal. But in the back of my mind, that buzzing phone kept nagging at me. It was like a ticking clock, and I couldn't get rid of the sound. She got up to grab a drink, and the second she was out of sight, I grabbed her phone. I know. It was a violation of trust, a mistake. But at that moment, I was too curious, too desperate for answers. I unlocked it. What I found shook me, and I never could have predicted where it would lead. The first thing that caught my eye was a message from someone named Jax. The name itself didn't mean much to me at first, just a random name in the list of her contacts. But when I started reading the messages, my heart sank. They weren't just messages. They were emotional. They were intimate. Casual texts at first, sure. But as I scrolled, it became clear that these weren't just friends catching up. Jax was someone from her past, someone she had clearly been in contact with for a while. They talked about memories I had never even heard of. They joked, they flirted. And in the middle of it all, I saw a message from her. I missed the way things were. We were so much better back then. I don't know what hit me harder, the fact that she was still in touch with him, or that she missed their old days more than she seemed to care about the life we had built together. I didn't know who Jax was at that moment, but I knew I had to find out. I didn't wait for her to come back. The anger, the confusion, the betrayal, they bubbled up inside me like a volcano. I had to know. I called the number. It was him. I couldn't believe it. I was hearing the voice of someone who had meant something to Elise, someone I had never even known about. He didn't answer, but the message he left me was enough. "Hey man, I wasn't expecting a call. Look, don't go making things complicated. Elise and I go way back. She's just being nostalgic. I don't think this is something you need to worry about." Nostalgic? Was he serious? When Elise returned, I confronted her. I didn't hold back. I told her I knew about the texts, the calls, the flirting. Her face went pale, but she quickly tried to downplay everything. "It's nothing. Jax is just an old friend, Jonah. We've been talking for a while. It's harmless, really." Her voice was calm, too calm. But it wasn't harmless. I wasn't stupid. I could hear the way she spoke about him, the way she lit up when she mentioned his name. She didn't seem ashamed. She seemed almost defensive. I wasn't sure how to react. Anger, confusion, and betrayal tangled together, and I didn't know where to put any of it. Was I overreacting? Or was there something bigger here? Then came the moment I'll never forget. The next morning, I woke up early, trying to get my head straight. I walked into the living room and froze. Elise had posted a picture on Instagram. It was a photo of her with Jax, smiling. At first, I thought I must be imagining things. I must have been seeing something that wasn't there. But as I looked closer, my stomach dropped. There they were, standing side by side, looking more than just friendly. The caption? "Sometimes, you just need to remember the good times. #oldfriends, #memories." I stood there, staring at the screen for what felt like hours. She posted a picture of her and him. A picture that made it clear she missed him. Missed the past they had, whatever it was. But the worst part? She didn't even care. No explanation, no apology, just a post like it was any other day. No thought to how it would make me feel, no second thought about our marriage. It was a slap in the face. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to say something. I wanted to scream. But in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about Jax anymore. This was about me. This was about her, and the truth I didn't want to see. And that's when I knew I had to make a choice. The picture wasn't the only thing that would change things. No, I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. Not anymore. I was going to do something about it. It wasn't the picture that shook me the most. Not at first. It was the way Elise acted like everything was perfectly fine. I was standing there, staring at my phone, wondering if I was losing my mind. She came into the living room, her usual cheerfulness filling the space, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in a house of glass. I was about to ask her about the photo when she spoke first. "Hey, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." Her voice was light, almost too light. I didn't know where to start. The betrayal, the lies, the discomfort that had been building for weeks. All of it was rushing through my veins like a tidal wave. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, but I had to remain calm. I had to understand why. Why she thought it was okay to do this. Why she thought I wouldn't notice. Why she thought I wouldn't care. I showed her the photo, the one with her and Jax smiling like they hadn't skipped a beat. "Elise, what is this?" My voice was steady, but inside I was unraveling. She took one glance at the phone and then back at me, almost too quickly, as if she didn't want to hold my gaze for too long. "It's just a picture. It's nothing." Her words were too rehearsed, like she had been expecting this moment. I had to bite back my frustration. "Just a picture? Elise, this isn't just a picture. This is you and him, together. You know how this looks, right?" She took a deep breath and crossed her arms. "Look, Jonah, I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. Jax and I have history, yes, but it's nothing more than that. We were just having a fun time, remembering the good old days." She paused, giving me that look, the one she knew I couldn't ignore. You know how you get when you're stuck in a rut. It's good to remember the past sometimes. It doesn't mean anything. I couldn't believe my ears. It didn't mean anything. All I could feel was my heart sinking further. I had seen the way she had looked at him in the messages, the way they had talked about us, the past they shared that somehow seemed more important than the present we had. "Do you really expect me to buy that?" I asked, my voice sharp. "You don't just post pictures with your ex for fun, Elise. You don't casually flirt with someone from your past for fun. You've been talking to him for months. You said you missed him. How is that nothing?" For a moment, she was silent. The calm, cool facade she had kept up was cracking, and I could see the faintest glimmer of guilt in her eyes. But it vanished as quickly as it came. She shook her head, as if trying to convince herself more than me. "Jonah, you're overreacting. Jax and I are just friends. This is your problem, not mine. You're making something out of nothing." But it wasn't nothing. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't blind. There was more between them than she was letting on, and I wasn't about to sit idly by and pretend everything was fine. I had been the perfect husband, patient, understanding, supportive, and this was how I was repaid? That's when it hit me. It wasn't just about the picture. It wasn't about the messages or the past. This was about Elise and me. It was about her choices and how she saw me. I wasn't the man she wanted anymore. Or maybe I was never the man she needed. And I hated the idea of admitting it, but it felt like I had been replaced. I could feel the anger starting to bubble up again, but I took a deep breath. This wasn't going to be the last time we spoke about this. No, I was going to confront her properly. No more excuses, no more sugarcoating it. I needed answers, not lies. I walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, staring after me with that same confused expression. I didn't care about the confusion. I cared about the truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't stop racing. I replayed every moment in my head, the late-night texts, the way she'd acted so distant, the coldness that had crept into our relationship without me noticing. I thought back to the small things, the way she'd laugh a little too easily at Jax's jokes when we were around mutual friends, how she'd talk about him like he was still a part of her life. But what really bothered me was how she seemed to have no problem with any of it. She didn't feel guilty. She didn't care about how I felt, how betrayed I was. It was as if I was just supposed to accept it. And for the first time in a long while, I realized something. I had been too understanding. I had been too willing to overlook things that I shouldn't have. The next day, Elise went to work, and I stayed home, trying to process everything. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than I was seeing. The thought gnawed at me. What else was she hiding? What had been going on behind my back that I hadn't caught yet? That afternoon, I decided to take a look through her phone. It wasn't the first time I had checked her phone, but this time, I was on a mission. I had to know everything, every detail. I had to find out what I had missed. I spent hours scrolling through her messages, through old texts, old photos, searching for clues, anything that would explain what was really going on. And then I found something. Something that made my stomach drop. A text from Jax that I hadn't seen before. "I can't stop thinking about you. It's not just the past. I still feel something for you. I've always wondered if we could pick up where we left off." I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. She had been lying to me the whole time. It wasn't just nostalgia, wasn't just a random friendly catch-up. She was still involved with him. She had feelings for him, feelings that were never really gone. I had been blind to the signs, but not anymore. I felt a cold, calm anger wash over me. I wasn't going to confront her with this just yet. I needed a plan. I needed to figure out how to handle this, because this wasn't something I was going to let slide. I couldn't. Not after everything I had learned. I took a deep breath, staring at the screen. I had to make her feel what I was feeling. She had made her choices, but now I was going to make mine. The days that followed that night were like a storm cloud hanging over me, blocking out any remnants of peace I thought I had left. It was as if my entire world had been flipped upside down in an instant. And the worst part? Elise acted like nothing had changed. She still smiled, still made dinner as if she hadn't, just completely shattered my trust. And I, the idiot that I was, kept pretending everything was fine. But deep down, I knew I had crossed a line. I couldn't just sit back and let this play out the way she wanted. I was done playing the role of the oblivious husband who shrugged off his wife's behavior. I started to notice even more things. Little gestures I hadn't paid attention to before. The way Elise would scroll through her phone in secret, almost like she was hiding something. The way she'd go out with friends, but never tell me where she was going, and how she'd come back with that far too innocent smile, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. It was as if the trust between us had been broken beyond repair, and yet she was still pretending like I was the crazy one. I couldn't stand it anymore. One evening, as she came in from work, I had enough. I had been planning this conversation in my mind for days, and tonight was the night I would force her to face the truth. I was sick of pretending I didn't see the cracks in our marriage, sick of pretending like everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. "Elise," I started, my voice steady but colder than usual. She looked up from her phone, a little surprised by the serious tone in my voice. "We need to talk. This whole thing with Jax, it's not just going to go away. I can't ignore it anymore. And honestly, I'm done pretending like I'm okay with this." Her eyes flickered, but she didn't say anything immediately. She just sat there, looking at me like she was waiting for me to finish. She always did that. She never wanted to face the truth head on. She'd rather let me spiral into confusion than address what was right in front of us. "I know what's been going on, Elise," I said, forcing the words out. "I know you've been seeing Jax, and I know you've been hiding it from me. All these messages, all these meetings, and the pictures, it's not just about reminiscing. You don't post pictures with an ex and say things like, 'I miss the way things were,' unless there's something more. So I'm asking you, no more lies. What's going on between you two?" For a moment, she didn't say a word. She just stared at me, her lips pressed tightly together, clearly weighing her options. I could see the internal struggle in her eyes. But then, as if she had made up her mind, she sighed and dropped her shoulders in resignation. "Jonah, I never meant for it to get this far," she finally said, her voice low. "Jax and I, we have a history. You know that. And maybe I've been a little nostalgic. But that's all it was. Just memories. And yes, we've talked a lot recently, but I swear to you, it's nothing like you think. You're making this into something it's not." Her words were so familiar, so predictable. Every time I confronted her with the truth, she'd spin it, downplay it, make it seem like I was the one imagining things. But this time, I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. I had seen enough to know there was more beneath the surface. I wasn't just dealing with a woman who was reminiscing about the past. I was dealing with someone who still had feelings for him. She wasn't just lost in memories. She was actively choosing him over me. "Elise, I'm not stupid," I said, leaning forward. "I saw the messages. I heard what Jack said. He's not just an old friend. He's still involved with you. And you've been lying to me this whole time. So don't sit here and tell me that it's nothing. You're hurting me, Elise. You've been hurting me for months, and you don't even care." The silence that followed was deafening. Elise looked like she was about to say something, but the words never came. Instead, she just stood up and walked out of the room, leaving me there, standing in the middle of our living room, heart racing. I don't know why, but I followed her. I needed to hear it from her lips. I needed her to admit what I already knew. Elise, stop, I said, grabbing her arm gently as she tried to walk away. Look me in the eye and tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm overreacting. Tell me I'm crazy. But don't keep pretending like you haven't been leading me on, like I don't know what's been going on. She yanked her arm away from me, her eyes blazing with anger. You have no idea what this is like, Jonah. You don't understand. Jax was a part of my life before you. And maybe you're right. Maybe I've been holding on to things that I shouldn't. But this isn't just about him. This is about me, too. I'm not happy, Jonah. I haven't been for a long time. The words hit me like a punch in the gut. I had always known that something was off between us. But hearing her say it out loud, admitting that she wasn't happy, it shattered everything I thought I understood about our relationship. You're not happy? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. And you think this is the way to fix it? By going behind my back and contacting him? By making me feel like I'm not enough for you? Do you even care about us anymore, Elise? Her face softened for a second, and I thought I might finally get the apology I was waiting for. But instead, she just looked at me, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of guilt and defiance. I'm sorry, Jonah, but I can't keep pretending. I don't love you the way I used to. I think you deserve someone who can love you fully. And I need to figure things out for myself. The words fell from her lips like daggers, and it felt like everything inside me had frozen. There was no anger left. There was no rage. Just an empty, hollow feeling, like I had been hollowed out from the inside. I think it's time we both stop pretending, she said quietly, before walking out of the room. I was left standing there, alone in the silence, realizing that everything I had built, everything I thought we had just crumbled before my eyes. The silence in the house was unbearable. It was like I was walking through a dream, a nightmare, where the walls were closing in and everything I knew was slipping away, piece by piece. I could still hear the sound of her footsteps as Elise walked down the hallway, the door to the bedroom clicking shut behind her. The finality of it all hit me harder than I expected. There were no more explanations, no more half-hearted apologies, just the sound of her retreating into herself, and me left standing at the broken remains of a relationship I had spent years building. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. Was I supposed to be angry? I should have been angry, right? After everything, I should have been furious. But I wasn't. I wasn't angry. I was just numb. How could I feel rage when I was facing the truth that, deep down, I had always been afraid of? That she didn't love me anymore. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my hands still gripping the back of the chair. The house felt too big now. The kitchen, the living room, even the bathroom, they all felt too far away from the place I had once believed was home. Everything felt foreign, like I was living someone else's life. I had to make a decision. A real one. I couldn't keep letting Elise dictate the terms of this relationship. I couldn't let her take the lead, not anymore. I had spent months ignoring the signs, hoping that I could fix whatever was broken between us. But now, I knew the truth. Elise had made her choice, and it wasn't me. But what now? I spent the next few days in a blur, just going through the motions. I didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to share what was going on with my friends or family. The idea of explaining this mess to anyone else felt like too much. I couldn't even explain it to myself. How had things gotten this bad? What happened to the guy who once thought he had it all? I couldn't avoid Elise forever, though. I knew I had to face her again. We had to have that final conversation, the one that determined whether or not we were going to try and fix this, or if we were both just going to walk away and pretend like nothing mattered anymore. The next night, she came into the living room and sat down across from me, but neither of us spoke at first. The air was thick, charged with everything that had been left unsaid. Her eyes avoided mine, and I could tell she was trying to figure out what to say, but she was too late. The damage had been done. I wasn't waiting for her to make up her mind anymore. Elise, we need to talk about what happens next, I said, my voice cold and steady. She flinched, but didn't say anything. Do you even want this marriage anymore? I asked, my words like poison as they slid off my tongue. Do you still care about me, or have you already decided that it's over? She looked up then, eyes red, but there was no tearful confession, no apology. She didn't look guilty or ashamed. She just looked tired. Jonah, I don't know what to say anymore. I've been trying to figure out what I want for so long. And maybe I'm not the person you think I am. I couldn't understand what she was trying to say. Was she blaming me? Was she admitting she didn't know what she wanted? Or was she telling me that I wasn't who she thought I was? The words were fuzzy, unclear, like she was grasping at something she couldn't articulate. Maybe you're not the person I thought you were either, I said, the hurt finally seeping through, but my tone still controlled. You've been lying to me, Elise. This wasn't just some mistake. You've been hiding this thing with Jax for months, pretending like everything was okay. I trusted you, and you threw that away. She looked at me for a long moment, her face softening. There was a shift in her, a crack in the armor she had built around herself. I know, she whispered, barely audible. I'm sorry, Jonah. I never wanted to hurt you. But the truth is, I haven't been happy for a long time, and I've been scared to admit it. To you. To myself. That was the moment it hit me. The cold, brutal reality that I had been living in denial. Elise hadn't just fallen out of love with me. She hadn't just made a mistake. She had been unhappy for a long time, and I had been too blind to see it. Worse, I had been clinging to the idea that things could be fixed, that we could go back to how things were. But in truth, we were long past that point. She was no longer the woman I married, and I was no longer the man she needed. I couldn't tell if she was waiting for me to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But I couldn't do it. Not anymore. There was nothing left to salvage, no words left to fix what had been broken. You should have told me sooner, I said, my voice strained. I could have understood. I might have even agreed. But you lied to me, Elise. And that's something I can't just forget. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I know. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. I could feel the finality of it all settling in. There was no going back from here. This was the end. Not just of a chapter, but of the entire story. We had outgrown each other, and no amount of apologies or I'm sorry's would fix it. I stood up slowly, the weight of everything pressing down on my chest. I don't think we can fix this, Elise. We've been hanging on to something that's already dead. I think it's time for both of us to let go. The words stung, but they were true. It was time to walk away. We both knew it. As I walked out of the room, I couldn't shake the image of Elise sitting there, still broken, still confused. But I also knew I had no more answers for her. No more explanations. The truth had already been laid bare, and the only thing left to do was walk away. And as I closed the door behind me, the sound felt like the final page turning in a book I could never read again. The days blurred together after that conversation with Elise. The finality of it all hung in the air like a heavy fog. I kept walking around our house, lost in a haze, trying to make sense of the wreckage that had once been my life. Every room held memories, some good, some painful, but none of them seemed to matter anymore. The house felt too big, too empty, and I couldn't escape the echo of Elise's words from that night. I haven't been happy for a long time. Those words kept playing in my mind, haunting me. They were simple, but they carried so much weight, and now that I had heard them, I couldn't unhear them. It was like a door had been opened, and I could see everything for what it truly was. The facade had fallen, and I realized that I had been living in a fantasy. I wasn't just a husband. I was a man who had been deceived, who had been putting the pieces together of a puzzle that no longer made sense. I tried to occupy myself, drowning in work, hoping the distraction would fill the silence that echoed around me. But the longer I stayed distracted, the more the silence gnawed at me. Elise was still there, but there was nothing left between us. The moments of brief interaction were like two strangers crossing paths, with nothing more than hollow pleasantries and an occasional forced smile. She went about her day, and I went about mine, but neither of us was truly present anymore. We were just two people inhabiting the same space, avoiding the truth we both knew. And then came the day that changed everything. I woke up to an empty bed, something that had become routine. Elise had already left for work, but I could still feel the lingering tension in the air. I had hoped that time would ease the pain, but it hadn't. In fact, it had only made things worse. The questions kept building in my mind. How did we get here? Why couldn't we fix this? What happened to the person I thought I knew? I was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through my phone, when I saw something that made my stomach drop. It was a notification from Facebook. It was a post, a photo from Elise. My heart pounded in my chest. The last thing I wanted to see was anything that involved Jax, but there it was. The post was from just a few hours ago. It was a photo of Elise and Jax, sitting close together, smiling like they had never been apart. They were in a park, the sunlight streaming through the trees, casting a warm glow on their faces. It looked so natural, so carefree, so intimate. Elise's arm was draped around his shoulder, her face alight with that familiar smile I hadn't seen in months. The caption read, "Some things never change. So glad we reconnected." The words hit me like a slap across the face. I could barely breathe. How could she do this? After everything we'd talked about, after everything I had said, how could she just post a photo like this? She knew how I felt. She knew the depth of the hurt I was carrying, and yet, she had the audacity to flaunt this, to shove it in my face. I felt like I was choking. I dropped my phone on the table, hands trembling. The betrayal cut deeper than any of her previous actions. This wasn't just about Jax anymore. This was about Elise's complete disregard for me. She didn't care how this made me feel. She didn't care about the life we had built or the trust she had shattered. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that she had posted the photo or the realization that she was moving on. She had clearly made her choice. And it wasn't me. In that moment, everything changed. I couldn't keep playing this game. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see what was happening. Elise had chosen him, and I had to accept that. But I couldn't let this go. Not without a fight. I grabbed my jacket and left the house. The streets were busy, but everything felt muted. The world was spinning, but I was trapped in my own thoughts, trying to make sense of it all. The betrayal, the lies, it was too much to process all at once. I needed to talk to someone, to get the anger out, but I didn't know who to turn to. I walked for hours, lost in the labyrinth of my own mind. I thought about the past, about the way things used to be. There had been so much love between us, so much hope. Where had it gone? How had I missed all the signs? Why hadn't I seen the distance between us growing? I wanted to blame her for everything. She was the one who had cheated emotionally, who had lied, who had taken everything I thought we shared and thrown it away. But deep down, I knew it wasn't all her fault. I had let it happen. I had ignored the signs. I found myself standing in front of a bar, a place I hadn't been in years. The urge to go in was overwhelming, but I wasn't sure why. I hadn't gone out to drink in ages. It wasn't like me. But tonight, I needed something. I needed to feel something different. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with the chatter of people trying to drown out their own problems, their own pain. I sat at the bar, ordered a drink, and tried to lose myself in the crowd. But no matter how much I drank, the image of Elise and Jax kept flashing in front of my mind, over and over again. I couldn't escape it. That's when I saw him. Jax. He walked into the bar like he owned the place, his presence immediately filling the room. My heart froze in my chest. I watched as he made his way to a booth in the back, laughing with a couple of friends. He didn't even notice me. And yet, I couldn't look away. I knew what I had to do. I had to confront him. No more running. No more pretending I didn't care. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. I was done with that. I stood up, my legs shaking as I walked toward him. The closer I got, the more my anger grew. It was his fault. He was the reason this had all happened. He had taken my wife, or at least a part of her, and I wasn't going to stand by and let him get away with it. When I reached his booth, I didn't give him a chance to speak. I slammed my hand down on the table, causing everyone around to stop and look. Jax, I said, my voice low and dangerous. We need to talk. Jax looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, surprised, maybe confused, but certainly not intimidated. His eyes flicked to the hand I had slammed on the table, then back to my face. He had probably seen men like me before, angry, jealous, desperate, but today, I wasn't just any man. Today, I wasn't the naive husband who thought everything would just work out. No, today I was a man who had been pushed to the edge, who had lost everything he thought mattered. I didn't wait for him to speak. I'm done playing this game, Jax. You and I both know what's going on between you and Elise. I've seen the texts, the pictures, the way she looks at you. Don't sit there like you're innocent in all of this. His face remained neutral, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the subtle shift in his posture. He wasn't as calm as he appeared. Jonah, he said slowly, his voice not quite matching the cool exterior. I don't know what you're talking about. Elise and I are friends. Nothing more. That's when the anger inside me ignited. Friends? He wanted to sit there and lie to me like that? He thought I would buy that excuse. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table, and for the first time, I let the words come out like venom. You're not just friends, Jax. Don't insult my intelligence. You've been messaging her for months. You've been meeting up with her, making her feel things that she shouldn't be feeling, things that she promised me she wouldn't. You've been playing her, and now you're playing me. My voice was shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the sheer weight of the betrayal that seemed to be bearing down on me. So, no more pretending. You and I both know exactly what's been going on. For the first time, he faltered. There was a flash of discomfort in his eyes, the kind of guilt that couldn't be hidden even by the most practiced smile. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by that same cocky confidence. He leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms, as if he had already won the argument. Listen, Jonah, I get it. I do, he said, his voice softening just a bit, as if he were trying to pacify me. But this isn't about you. Elise and I, we've always had a connection. You can't just erase history because you're uncomfortable with it. She and I have talked about it. I'm not trying to steal her from you. If anything, I've been trying to help her find herself again. My blood ran cold at his words. Trying to help her find herself again? Was he serious? Elise had been lying to me, hiding this whole emotional connection behind my back, and here he was, trying to act like the savior? It was more than I could take. I stood up abruptly, leaning over the table toward him. Help her. I spat. No, Jax. You've been using her, manipulating her, making her think she needs something from you. And you've been doing it all at my expense. At her expense. And don't act like I'm the villain here. You knew exactly what you were doing when you posted that photo with her. You knew exactly what you were doing when you made her feel like she needed you more than she needed me. He didn't respond immediately, but the way he looked at me said it all. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the smugness that made my skin crawl. He wasn't going to apologize. He wasn't going to admit to any wrongdoing. To him, this was just another game, another opportunity to win. And for a brief moment, I realized something that chilled me to the core. He wasn't afraid of me. He didn't have to be. Elise had already made her choice. I took a step back, feeling the reality of it all sinking in. It wasn't just about what Jax had done. It wasn't even about the photo. It was about the fact that Elise had allowed it. She had allowed him into our lives, into our marriage, and I was the last to know. She had let him chip away at everything we had built, piece by piece, while I stood there, blind and trusting. So what now? Jax asked, as if he had no clue why I was so upset. What are you going to do, Jonah? Yell at me some more? Punch me in the face? What would that solve? His words were meant to provoke, but they only left me feeling more hollow. The rage that had built up inside me was no longer directed at him. It was directed at myself. How could I have let this happen? How could I have been so naive? I'm not here to fight with you, Jax, I said, my voice steadier now, though it still carried the weight of everything that had just come crashing down. I'm here because I need to know what you want from her. What do you want from my wife? He laughed, almost like he was amused by my question. What do I want? What makes you think I want anything from her that you can't give her? I've known Elise for years, Jonah. I'm not trying to take anything from you. I'm just here for her, for the things she's missing. And right now, she's missing me. I'm just here to remind her of that. His words cut deeper than anything he had said before. It wasn't just about what he had taken. It was the way he spoke about her, like she was a puzzle piece he had misplaced and now wanted back. And worse, it was the way he spoke about me, as if I was nothing more than a temporary fixture in her life. As if I had always been second place. I didn't have the strength to argue with him anymore. This wasn't a battle I could win with words. Elise had already made her decision, and no matter how many times I tried to confront Jax or her, I would never be the one to change her mind. Not now. Not when she had already moved on. I turned away from Jax, not saying another word. I didn't need to. The message had been clear. This was the end. There was no turning back. No fixing this. Elise was gone. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. The realization that the life I thought I had was nothing more than a facade. I walked out of the bar, not looking back. The anger, the pain, it was all still there, but it felt different now. More distant. More like a memory I couldn't touch. And as I stepped out into the cold night air, I realized I wasn't just walking away from Jax. I was walking away from a life I had outgrown. A life that no longer existed. I walked away from the bar, the weight of everything still hanging heavy around me. The cold night air hit my face like a slap, and for a moment, I let it burn into my skin. It wasn't that I was ashamed of what I had just done, confronting Jax, that is. No, I wasn't ashamed of that. But there was something more profound, more personal gnawing at me. It was the realization that everything I had built with Elise, everything I thought was real, was nothing more than an illusion. I wasn't just walking away from a bar or from Jack's. I was walking away from the life I had once believed was everything. As I walked down the empty streets, the city lights flickering around me, I realized something I hadn't dared to admit to myself before. Elise wasn't the woman I had married. She wasn't even close. I had built this fantasy in my mind, a world where she and I were the center of everything, where we shared secrets, dreams, and promises. But now, I could see it for what it was, a delicate house of cards, ready to fall with just a push. I had been living in denial, clinging to the hope that things would go back to the way they once were, even though I had felt the distance growing between us for months. But the distance wasn't just physical. It was emotional. She had pulled away, piece by piece, until I was left holding on to nothing but the remnants of a marriage that was long gone. She had already moved on, and I was still here, lost in the wreckage. The truth of it hit me like a wave. Elise didn't care about me. She didn't love me the way she once had. And the worst part? I had been too blind to see it. She had been emotionally involved with Jax for months, and I had been the last to know. The betrayal didn't sting as much anymore. It had shifted into something colder, something darker. I felt hollow, empty, like a ghost in my own life. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Not with all the memories of what we had, or what I thought we had, haunting every corner. I needed to get away, even if it was just for a few days. I needed to clear my mind, to stop pretending like I could fix something that was beyond repair. I went home to grab a bag, just enough to get me through a few days. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay in that house. I needed space. I needed time to breathe. When I walked through the front door, I wasn't surprised to find Elise sitting on the couch, her eyes glued to her phone, as usual. She didn't look up when I walked in, didn't even acknowledge me. I had half expected this. She had already checked out emotionally, and I was just a presence she had to coexist with for now. "Jonah," she said without looking up. "Where are you going?" The question was casual, as if she hadn't just torn our marriage apart. As if I was just going on a business trip, not leaving because everything between us was broken beyond repair. "I'm leaving for a few days," I said, my voice flat, even though the emotions were churning inside me. "I need some space." Her fingers paused on the screen, but she didn't look up. "Space? From what?" "From you. From this lie we've been living." But I didn't say that. I didn't need to. I wasn't interested in hearing her explanations or excuses anymore. "I just need some time to think," I said, my voice catching just slightly. "I'll be back soon." She finally looked at me, and for the first time in days, I saw something like guilt in her eyes. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. "I'm sorry, Jonah," she said softly, and for a moment, I almost believed her. But I couldn't. I couldn't fall for it again. I grabbed my bag and walked out the door without another word. I heard her calling my name behind me, but I didn't turn back. There was nothing left to say. No words that could undo what had already been done. The drive was long, aimless. I didn't have a destination in mind, but I ended up in a small town about 2 hours away from home. I checked into a dingy motel, one of those places you only stay at when you don't know where else to go. The kind of place that felt empty, just like how I felt inside. I threw my bag onto the bed and collapsed next to it, staring at the ceiling. My mind was racing, but I couldn't keep up. What had I done wrong? What had I missed? Elise had been my everything. We had built a life together, and now it was all gone. I couldn't stop going over every single moment, every conversation, every laugh. I was trying to piece together how it had all unraveled so quickly, but I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't understand how the woman I loved so much could have drifted away without me even noticing. I pulled out my phone, half expecting to see more messages from Elise. But there was nothing. No apology. No explanation. It was as if I had become invisible to her. And that hurt more than anything. I stared at the blank screen for a while before putting my phone down and burying my face in my hands. I had never felt so completely alone in my life. The pain was almost suffocating. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the silence. The distance that had grown between us over time. Elise had been pulling away from me for so long, and I hadn't even realized it until it was too late. It wasn't just that she had moved on with Jax. It was that she had moved on without me, without even a second thought. And I was left here, trying to make sense of a life that no longer felt like mine. The next few days passed in a blur. I didn't speak to Elise, and she didn't reach out to me. There were no apologies, no attempts at reconciliation. It was as if we were already living separate lives. I thought about going back, confronting her, but the truth was clear now. There was nothing left to fight for. I had already lost her. I spent the time in that small town, trying to figure out who I was without her. But the truth was, I didn't know anymore. Elise had been my anchor, and now that she was gone, I was adrift in a sea of confusion and hurt. I wasn't sure how to move forward, or even if I wanted to. The only thing I knew was that I couldn't go back to the life I had. Not with her, not with the lies, and certainly not with Jax. Something had broken inside me, and I wasn't sure it could ever be fixed. The only thing left to do now was to let go of the past and figure out how to live in this new reality, one where Elise was no longer by my side. The days that followed felt like a blur of confusion and loneliness. I stayed in the small town, away from the wreckage of my old life, not knowing what to do next. I spent most of my time walking around, thinking, reflecting, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so suddenly. The pain of it all was overwhelming at first. The betrayal, the emptiness, the shattered trust. It was like I had lost everything I had ever cared about in one swift motion, and I didn't know how to recover from it. But as the days passed, something began to shift. Slowly, I started to realize that I wasn't completely powerless. Yes, my marriage had ended, but that didn't mean my life had to. I had been so wrapped up in Elise and what we had that I had forgotten about who I was outside of that. For the first time in a long time, I started to remember the things I had once loved, the hobbies I had set aside, the goals I had forgotten, the dreams I had neglected. One morning, after another restless night, I decided to go for a run. It was something I used to do regularly, but had abandoned when life with Elise had become all-consuming. The cool morning air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. I didn't know where the run would take me, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that for the first time in a long time, I was doing something for myself. It was a small victory, but it was mine. The run gave me clarity. I realized that while I couldn't change the past, I could change how I moved forward. Elise had her own path now, one that didn't include me, and I had to accept that. The betrayal hurt, but it wasn't the end of me. It wasn't the end of my happiness. I was still here, still alive, still capable of finding joy in the world around me. And that was something I needed to hold on to. I returned to the motel after my run, feeling lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I made a decision that day. I was going to go back home. I wasn't going back to try and fix things with Elise. That chapter of my life had closed. But I was going back because I needed to move forward. I needed to reclaim my life, my peace, and my sense of self. When I returned home, the house felt different. It was still the same place, but it no longer held the same weight. Elise wasn't there, and in a strange way, that felt like a fresh start. I cleaned up the place, threw out things that reminded me of the past, and rearranged some of the furniture. It felt like I was putting my life back together, piece by piece. A few weeks later, I ran into an old friend at a coffee shop. Her name was Sophie, someone I had known years ago but lost touch with over time. We exchanged pleasantries, and she asked how I had been doing. For the first time in months, I found myself genuinely smiling. I told her about everything, about the marriage, the heartbreak, and the journey I was on to rebuild myself. She listened, offering support, and before I knew it, we were laughing about old memories, reconnecting like no time had passed. It wasn't romantic, but it was a reminder that there was still joy to be found in the world. Over the next few months, Sophie and I became good friends again. We spent time together, hiking, grabbing coffee, talking about life. It was refreshing. She didn't ask for anything. She wasn't trying to fix me. She simply accepted me for who I was, scars and all. And slowly, I started to feel like myself again. I also began to focus on my career again, something that had taken a back seat during my marriage. I threw myself into projects I was passionate about and found that my professional life began to thrive. I realized how much of myself I had left behind in the shadows of a relationship that no longer served me. But now, I was stepping back into the light. One day, as I sat at my desk, looking out the window at the busy street below, I smiled to myself. Life was never going to be perfect, but it was still beautiful. I had learned things about myself that I never knew before, strengths I hadn't realized I had, passions I had buried under the weight of trying to keep a relationship alive. And even though my marriage had ended, even though it hurt more than I could have ever imagined, I had found a new sense of hope. I didn't need Elise to complete me. I didn't need anyone to tell me who I was. I had found my way back to myself, and that was worth more than anything I had ever given up. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I ran into Elise again. It wasn't planned. I was at a local event, and she happened to be there. When our eyes met, I could see the hesitation in her expression. For a brief moment, it felt like time had stopped. But then she smiled, and I smiled back. We didn't say much, just exchanged a few words. Nothing heavy, nothing to reopen old wounds. But in that moment, I realized something. I was no longer holding on to the past. I had let go. I had found my peace, and it didn't depend on her anymore. I didn't need closure from her. I didn't need answers to the questions I had once obsessed over. I had created my own closure. I had built my own future, and it was mine to shape. As I walked away from that brief encounter with Elise, I felt lighter than I had in years. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer had a hold on me. It had become just a part of my story, not the whole story. And the best part? I was still writing the next chapter. Life wasn't perfect, and maybe it never would be. But it was mine. And that was enough.